Salutations and welcome back to Idea Sex, where we take an analytical lens to mystical and spiritual phenomena. Today, we are going to be continuing the conversation around spiritual awakening. And in the last video, we talked about how the end goal of a spiritual awakening is enlightenment. We defined enlightenment as the ability to respond to everything with love. And regardless of whether or not we ever actually get there, the important part is that a spiritual awakening is attempting to evolve us to this place of operating from a higher state of consciousness. And so historically, humanity, our ancestors, operated from this place of fear, control, ego, scarcity. And a spiritual awakening is an opportunity to transcend that and operate from a place of love, unity, surrender, and abundance. This is not an easy transition to make. When you think about it, we are going against generations of programming. Like when you think about our ancestors, they lived in fear, right? They were much more susceptible to illnesses, natural disasters. They did not have much access to resources like we do today, right? We just can Amazon Prime anything. And they had basically every reason to kill each other. And so a lot of this sort of archaic mode of operating has carried over into an age where it's no longer necessary. And what's so interesting is that these same ancestors prophesized an age where we would no longer be operating like this. So in ancient cultures all over the world, and this is what we're going to get into today, it has been prophesized that humanity would experience a shift in our collective consciousness. And this would herald the golden age of humanity, an era of peace. So it was called different things in different cultures, right? The land of milk and honey, paradise on earth, age of Aquarius, 5D, a lot of different names for the same concept. And a lot of people in the woo-woo spiritual circles would tell you that transition is happening right now. Because we can feel it, right? Which is not very substantial in the way of evidence. And we could also look to the external world and see that a lot of our traditional systems that are built on fear and control are crumbling, perhaps making way for a new earth. But again, not really substantial in the way of evidence. So where's the proof in this pudding? Well, I think I found some of it, and that's what I'm going to share in this video. We're going to take a look at a few different pieces of evidence for this shift in consciousness. And I think each one taken by itself may not mean anything, but taken together, I think it tells us everything. Let's start here with the hard data. At the end of 2019 and going into 2020, I started to get downloads about a big shift, a sort of a mass spiritual awakening. And whenever I have these experiences, these intuitive experiences of knowing something without knowing how I know it, I tend to be very skeptical. But it's also been right often enough that I don't completely dismiss these ideas. When they come into my head, I just look for possible ways of verifying them. And so going into 2020, it felt like tectonic plates shifting under the collective. And I could not get this idea of a mass awakening, of a big shift out of my head. And so I was like, okay, where can I look to validate this? And I actually found the answer at my day job. So at the time I was working as an SEO, search engine optimizer. And search engine optimization is all about helping people get found online. So optimizing websites so that people can find you on Google. And a big part of that role is analyzing search trends. So how many people on the planet are searching for a given term? They're typing in the same phrase into Google. And what I realized is that search engine optimization, search trends, aren't just a great way to sell shit, but they actually give us an incredible insight into the collective consciousness, into a cultural paradigm, into our current zeitgeist. And that gave me an idea. I was like, if a lot of people are experiencing a spiritual awakening, that's going to be reflected in the data. Because speaking from experience, it's a weird experience, right? You're going to want answers. And when most people need answers, they turn to the internet. And so my hypothesis was that if there was a mass awakening going on, we would see a graph with a significant upward trend.
Like a glove.
So this graph got my logical mind on board. He was like, hell yeah, let's solve the mystery, Scooby-Doo. And so I started to research, and the more I rabbit holed, the more I realized that ancient cultures all over the world have predicted this big shift in consciousness and what it's supposed to lead to. So here's the really high-level eagle's eye overview. As certain celestial bodies come into alignment in outer space, right, as certain planets do shit in the galaxy, it is affecting energy down here, as above, so below. This is affecting what is called our evolutionary energy, or Kundalini energy, causing more people to have awakenings. The end goal of an awakening is to operate from a place of love and unity, which we talked about in video 1. And so if enough of us wake up, it opens the door to the new earth. Kicking it off with the one everyone is familiar with, the Mayan Prophecy of 2012. And let me preface this by pointing out the spike we see in 2012. Coincidence? Well, I don't believe in those. It's interesting that people thought we were headed toward an apocalypse. It's even more interesting that the word apocalypse comes from a Greek word meaning a revealing, an uncovering, a lifting of the veil. Because that's really what a spiritual awakening is. It's this lifting of the veil. It is an uncovering of our true nature. Truth with a capital T. And these ancient cultures knew a lot of truth. They knew that just as we are children of the earth, that earth is a child of the cosmos. And so we are being swept up in time to this great cosmic dance, which is why the ancient Mayans, Hindus, Egyptians, they were all master timekeepers, mapping not just the way the earth moves around the sun, but these massive spans, these cycles of cosmic time. A lot of these ancient cultures were attuned to what was and is happening on a macro level. And they believed that what's happening up there affects what's happening down here. Today that's called astrology, but for ancient cultures it was indistinguishable from astronomy. As above, so below. Today that's hokey. Back then it was known. And really just like it makes sense. Think about the moon, which is a much smaller celestial body, and we know that affects human behavior. Fact, violent crime waxes with the full moon. So on what planet are galactic shenanigans not going to have an effect on the inhabitants? And I mean that literally. On what planet? Approximately none of them. Thank you very much. I digress. Back to these cultures, these ancients and their stars. John Major Jenkins sums it up well in Galactic Alignment when he writes, "We are currently being overwhelmed by an astonishing array of evidence and clear-headed interpretations that reveal a definite fact about these archaic cultures. That is, they recognized our impending alignment with the center of the galaxy and considered this alignment to be the moment of greatest spiritual opportunity for human beings on Earth." In other words, a certain alignment in our stars, right between the sun and the heart of the Milky Way galaxy. It happens once every 25,000 years. This was believed to spur an evolution in humans, spur us to evolve in an energetic, spiritual way, evolve our consciousness to a better, higher place. In other words, the Mayan prophecy is not about the end of the world. It's about the end of a way of thinking, the end of an old world. And in Hinduism, this is really similar to the Kali Yuga, right? This era of spiritual darkness, of materialism that we've kind of been declining into, ends in kind of a bloodbath, and then we're reborn into a world age, which is all about brotherly love and recognizing what we are beyond these physical forms. This prediction of a big shift into a golden age, it is inscribed in the stories and astronomies of our ancestors. It has been passed down to us through legends and myths, in sacred cartography, in the way the ancients mapped their art and entire civilizations to the heavens. So whether we're talking about the Mayans, the ancient Egyptians, the ancient Hindus, some Norse cultures, all of the mystics, right, whether they're Kabbalist, Sufi, Christian, Hermetic, all of them have talked about this same phenomenon, just in the different languages and metaphors of their respective cultures. And we're not going to get into specifics today because it's going to end up being like a 3-hour lecture. And I actually think it would be kind of fun to do a video on each of these interpretations of a shift, of an awakening, and then maybe make that like a playlist on the channel sometime this year when I have time. But a good summary of it comes from the Source Field Investigations by David Wilcock. And he has this to say. The Hindus, the Mayas, and the Egyptian/Greek/Roman astrology tradition all appeared to converge on the same 2-year period from 2012 to 2014 as the window in which major changes are predicted to take place. Hardly anyone is aware that these 2012 prophecies are truly a worldwide phenomenon appearing on either side of the Atlantic. And this is why the active idea sex is so gosh dang important. We should be having unprotected, unfiltered idea sex all the time with everyone, especially dead people, because this intercourse of ideas from different cultures, thinkers, and disciplines, it points the freaking way. Where there is overlap, there is truth. What is this, like a mutant ninja turtle? like some fucking Naruto move. What is this? So in the case of this 2012 to 2014 window, not a freaking coincidence. What do you know? The world is fucking magical. I feel like it's easy to overlook that. I overlook it all the time because these things happen so slowly. They unfold over seasons. And since day-to-day life can get kind of mundane, it's easy to miss the magic in the moments. But when you look at how this stuff plays out over years, over millennia, it's totally magic. It's magic, or I'll eat my hat, my pointy hat. So a lot of this ancient astronomy stuff had to do with the Galactic Center. And John Major Jenkins sort of popularized the idea of a galactic center. And when I say popularized, I don't mean he made it popular. I mean, it's very fringe and pissed a lot of people off. So ancient metaphysicians and cosmologists all believed that we have a galactic center. And this idea has been ardently rejected by the mainstream. But like Wilcock, Jenkins' idea sexes between a bunch of different cultures: Mayans, Mesoamerican, Egyptian, Vedic, Gnostic, Greco-Roman, a bunch of them. And he does this to show us that alignments to the galaxy periodically occur, and these alignments offer spiritual renewal for humanity. The way he talks about it is that the event in 2012, and when we talk about event, it's not like a light switch. December 12th, 2021, December 21st, 2012, whatever it is. All of these different dates, it's not a light switch. These things unfold, again, like seasons. But the way Jenkins talks about it is that it's like this, a cosmic Kundalini awakening. Again, as above, so below. And this cosmic Kundalini awakening is believed to stir a corresponding energy in each of us. Kundalini means coiled, and it is an energy that rests at the bottom of our spine, coiled like a snake. And during a Kundalini awakening, it's believed that the energy passes up through our spine, through each of our chakras, and comes out the crown chakra like a little light whale. And that energy spreads around someone's head and becomes a halo, which is why we see the imagery of halos all over the world, right? Not just Christian angels, but any being who has achieved an enlightened state. Side note, a spiritual awakening is not the same thing as a full-blown Kundalini awakening, but my current hypothesis is that it is the same energy, the same driving force, the Kundalini, that sort of triggers both of these. But we'll get into that in a future video. One of the best resources on Kundalini awakening is Gopi Krishna's work. And he popularized the idea of Kundalini in the West in like the 70s. So he had a direct experience of enlightenment. He had a Kundalini awakening and wanted to study it scientifically. This is why I freaking adore him, because back in the 70s, he was like, this is real, and we need to study it with empirical science, and we can study it by looking at chemical and physical changes that happen in the body during enlightenment. Gopi experienced a difficult Kundalini awakening. It almost killed him, and after that, he made it his life's work to understand what had happened to him scientifically. And the conclusion he came to is that there is a marvelous potential present in the human body that is drawing humankind toward a sublime state of consciousness. I have sown the seeds of what I consider to be the most pressing need of mankind, namely information about the evolutionary mechanism in human beings, slowly drawing the race into a golden age of harmony, peace, and happiness. In other words, Gopi believed that we are being guided by this evolutionary energy. It's an intelligent energy. to evolve into the kind of species that can exist in a state of harmony, peace, and happiness. And Eckhart Tolle says something similar. At least this is what it reminded me of in his book, A New Earth. He opens this book by talking about how the first flower came into existence. And he's like, you know, the first one that ever popped up on Earth when Earth was just like the soup of whatever atmosphere, it probably didn't live very long. And after that, however many thousands of years would pass before another one would spring up, and they'd all kind of be here and then gone. And so they were really rare flowers until one day they weren't, and they covered the entire planet. And then he concludes that metaphor by saying that Jesus and Buddha were the early flowers of our species. They have been preparing the ground for a more profound shift in planetary consciousness that is destined to take place in the human species. This is the spiritual awakening we are beginning to witness now. He was writing this in 2005, by the way. Is humanity ready for a transformation of consciousness? The possibility of such a transformation has been the central message of the great wisdom teachings of humankind. The messengers, Buddha, Jesus, and others, not all of them known, were humanity's early flowers. They were the precursors, rare and precious beings. A widespread flowering was not yet possible at the time, and their message became largely misunderstood and often greatly distorted. It certainly did not transform human behavior, except in a small minority of people. Is humanity more ready now than at the time of those early teachers? All right, let's recap. 1, ancient cultures and religions prophesized this evolution in human consciousness. A lot of them saw it as having to do something with certain alignments in celestial bodies, as above, so below. And those galactic shenanigans would sort of trigger a resonant energy in us. And if enough of the species evolved, we would open a door to a new Earth. And like I said in the first video, I don't think it has to be full-blown enlightenment or Kundalini if those things even exist, right? I think maybe it really is just as simple as internalizing that one teaching. Treat others as you want to be treated. Love thyself. Love thy neighbor as they love thyself, and it harm none, do as ye will. We're just terrible at it. And that's why I will not be surprised if things get worse before they get better. Like in a lot of the famous prophecies, Nostradamus, Edgar Cayce, Sylvia Brown, something like that, like the world doesn't have a happy ending, right? And in things like Hinduism and Norse mythology, there's this period of annihilation before the golden age, right? In Hinduism, it's like, I think the whole world burns. And then in Norse mythology, a giant wolf eats the sun. David Wilcock in Source Field Investigation says the apocalyptic part of this is symbolic of like the internal battle, the struggle that we all go through as we try to progress toward this state, as we try to evolve. I think he's an optimist. I think it's a good idea to, you know, have a disaster plan. Don't scare yourself, because we got to anchor in that 5D energy, and that's the opposite of fear. But I think it's obvious when you look around at the possibility of civil war, of a civilization crisis by 2030. A lot of the systems we have in place are unsustainable. And so we can feel this rift happening, and New Agers call this 3D versus 5D, right? 3D is the old world energy. It's the matrix, it's ego, fear, scarcity, control. And then 5D is brotherly love, unity, all of that stuff. And I think it's so interesting that as we see more and more people wake up, we're seeing the sort of death throes of the old 3D world. We see a global elite rolling out draconian measures, and this transcends political parties. By the way, the same 5 to 6 conglomerates own all major news outlets in the United States, and all of those conglomerates serve one master. And so we can talk about 3D and 5D like they're these abstract, energetic concepts, but I think we're seeing it play out in the real world in a very real way. On one hand, we've got the 0.001% pushing for the crystallization of a surveillance state, the centralization of power, and possibly the most massive wealth transfer we've ever seen in human history. And on the other hand, we have people who are awake to what's happening. And so the question for me isn't whether or not we transition into a new earth. My faith is unshakable. The question for me is, what is it going to take for us to get there, right? Like, let's hope for a peaceful transition, but it may also have to be the case that the old world has to burn before the new one can be born. And then it's interesting to consider, what would a new earth look like? And I think one thing that would be fun to get into on this channel is to talk about some of the possibilities. So looking at things like futuristic technologies that exist right now, but are kept under lock and key. Different economic models that would maybe create a more equitable world. Real life blueprints for utopia. People have done that. They've made blueprints. All we have to do is be aware of them.
But that is it for today.
If you enjoyed this, if it resonated, do subscribe and join the guild. This is going to be an ongoing series that attempts to define spiritual awakening, this strange phenomenon. Thank you for joining me on Ideas Sex today, and until next time, stay blessed. These things are not easy to breathe in. Okay.
Thank God, smack a bitch today. Thank God I did not have to smack a bitch today.
Thank you for so much for oh, I don't want to.